Hello friends, my name is Anam and in today's video I'll take you to the process of how to review a manuscript. So are you all ready? Let's start. So basically in the process of how to review a manuscript, there are three most basic and courteous rules that you need to follow. And what are those rules? The first point is to be polite and friendly. The second talks about being constructive, and the third one talks about being open-minded. So at times people are confused that what is being open-minded. So open-minded basically means that we don't have to impose our methods, our theories and our ideas on the authors, because we all have some favorite theories and methods which we follow. So now these steps, we actually once receive the invitation, what are the things that need to be considered? So when you are invited to review a manuscript, ask three important questions to yourself. And what are those important questions? Let's figure out them. Okay. So the first thing is, do you have the adequate expertise in that particular area? And do you have enough time to review? And can you be objective and free from any competing interest? Only if you think that you can say yes to all of these questions, only then you should move ahead. Otherwise, there is no point accepting the invitation to review the manuscript. Okay? So don't say yes unless you are satisfied with all these questions. Moving ahead, what happens at times that you think that you can qualify to review the manuscript, but you are not sure. And why you're not sure? Because you think you are expert in one aspect of the manuscript, but you are not sure that you will be able to review it. So now the point comes when you think that you are an expert in one part of the manuscript and you want to say yes, but you are not sure about the entire manuscript. So you feel a bit hesitant in accepting it. The second reason could be, you have the time. You think that yes, I have the time, but if I have a little more time, a little more days, then it will be easy for you to review the manuscript in a better way. Lastly, the point comes that you have a competing interest. You agree that you have a competing interest, but you think that that competing interest would not come in the way of reviewing the manuscript. So especially when all these things happens, it is always advisable for you to contact the journal team and let them decide that what should be the future course of action, whether you should continue reviewing the manuscript or you should not continue. So leave that decision completely on the journal team, right? Alright, so now it's the time to read the manuscript. So what are the things to keep in your mind while reading the manuscript? So while reading a manuscript, it's always better to first read the whole manuscript and then to take a closer look at the different parts. Always remember to take lots and lots of notes and to mark down sections and page numbers so that you can come back to them later. Okay, am I clear with it? So now coming on to the evaluation criteria. What is the evaluation criteria? We will be starting with the contribution, the most important evaluation criteria, because it determines whether the manuscript has the potential to be invited for revisions or simply rejected. Okay. Now coming on to the theoretical contribution. So the theoretical contribution, like for most of the academic journals, theoretical contribution will be far most important decision criteria to accept, redesign or reject the manuscript. Your empirical contribution. What do we understand by the empirical contribution? At times it happens that the authors might have, collected some really good data and they have found some great results. So that is the empirical contribution. Coming on to the practical implications. Practical implications are also very important. but they are slightly less important if you talk about academic journals, although they are very important. And talking about the theory in terms of application, understanding, then comes the methods that you have actually used, the authors have used which methods. While evaluating, you need to consider the methods that have been adopted. We'll be talking about the methods a little more detail in the later discussion. Now coming on to the novelty. What do we mean by novelty? By novelty, we actually mean the uniqueness, the newness of that particular manuscript. What we are actually adding on. Are we actually adding on something, or we are not adding on? Then comes the writing. Writing is basically the preferred structure of how a manuscript is written. We cannot go haywire, So there is a particular structure, and the manuscript should be written in that particular structure from starting till the end. Then comes the fit. By fit, we actually mean that whether the manuscript fits well into the guidelines of the journal or not. So if it is not fitting into the guidelines of the journal, that cannot be considered. Okay? I hope the evaluation criteria is being easily understood by you all. Now let's move ahead and give you some more details of the evaluation criteria. Okay? Alright, so now we'll be discussing a little more about the evaluation criteria. So now let's understand that what is the manuscript all about. We need to understand. So the authors recognize the main research questions and the key claims? They should be clearly stated in the introduction. All the key claims and the major questions, they have to be stated in the introduction itself. Then the authors should also explain the related research and explain how the study fits into that context. Look at the figures and tables and check the results. The results have to be checked, and they have to be seen that whether the results match with what has been shown in the manuscript or they don't match at all. That has to be taken care of. And you also have to look at the methods and study design. Are the methods appropriate for the study? Does they follow the relevant reporting guidelines? And do they meet the ethical standards, or they don't meet the ethical standards? Now finally, read the conclusion and see whether they are supported by the data and the results, or they are not supported. That has to be seen. Okay, so now finally the turn comes when you have to write the review. So for writing the review, you need to confirm 3 important points. So what are those points? As you can clearly see it on your screens, confirm the journal guidelines. Second is to confirm the special instructions. And third is check your decision options. So basically, to give you a more elaborative form of this, first find out how the review needs to be formatted and submitted. Some journals might have a structured form and specific questions to its bounty, and we need to keep that in mind. Also check if you want to recommend a decision like minor or a major revision. And all this information might be in your invitation or review guidelines or in the online system itself. So I hope you are clear with the things that we have discussed so far. So can we move ahead? Okay, so let's move ahead to the... Okay, so now we'll be talking about the review structure. So use an outline to keep your comments organized and easy to read. Keep your key messages at the top, followed by evidence and examples, and then additional details at the bottom. Stop by summarizing the research in your own words and stating your overall impression. In the middle section, tell the authors what they need to do to improve the manuscript. Divide these sections into major issues and minor issues. So now you'll ask, what are major issues and minor issues? So my dear friends, major issues are those essential things which are considered to be a must before the manuscript is considered further. Whereas the minor issues are also important, but these are comparatively smaller in scope and they don't actually affect the overall conclusions. Example, giving more context or additional references. So focus on what is fundamental for the current study. It is not appropriate to recommend an additional work which will be a next step in the research. So don't recommend that. First focus on the fundamentals of your current study. Okay? So the review structure is clear. The diagram, I hope, makes it clearer and better for you to understand. So finally, in the review structure, there is another important aspect that has to be considered. And what is that aspect? That aspect is the confidentiality of the comments. So if there are any confidential comments that needs to be shared privately with the journal editor. State if you have any competing interest or any concern about the ethics and misconduct. In these cases, it's always a good idea to get in touch with the journal staff. So always do that. So by this, we somehow finish with the review structure, and let's proceed to the next step. Okay, so now as we are talking about the review report, what is your main goal? Always remember that your main goal is to improve the manuscript. So be specific about what needs to be done. So here is the checklist that is present in front of you on your screens, which will actually help you to know that what are the things and what is basically required to be included in your checklist. Starting on with the figures and tables. So if the tables and figures and reports are approximately presented, are they labeled, and whether they actually show what they claim or they don't show. Then you talk about the methods. Earlier in the video, I said that you'll be talking about, the methods in more detail. So here coming on to the methods. If the methods are detailed enough, it is always important for you to see that whether the methods are detailed enough or not, so that the another researcher can understand and follow them. Because if other researchers are not able to understand and follow them, your manuscript, your paper is of no use, because it is of no use to others. Okay, so the methods have to be clearly stated. Coming on to the study design, so you have to see that if the study design is appropriate for the question asked, because the design should match with the questions that are actually being asked. And are there any experiments that are missing? If there is something missing, then you need to check on that. And you can also verify that the statistics are sound or not. And if you think that there is any additional statistics necessary for analysis, you need to mention that clearly, that these are the areas, these are the statistics that needs to be included in your manuscript for better analysis. Coming on to the results. So if the results, do the results support the conclusions or not? And is the data accessible? An important point. Coming on to the references, any references which are missing has to be settled, has to be seen that what are the references which are missing in your manuscript. And title, coming on to the title, is the title appropriate and informative, right? Well, now I think that the review report structure is also clear to you, and we are almost done. There are just few final reminders that need to be explained and that need to be discussed further, which now I'll be discussing. Alright, so now when we are talking about the final reminders, so what are the final reminders? The first and most important thing is to number your comments. It's always important to number your comments so that it becomes easier to read. Okay. Now always include line or page numbers so that the authors know you are following too. Right? The authors should actually know that what are you following. and are you in the right direction or not, because the authors will be reading your comments. And don't waste your time in finding grammatical issues. Okay, the main concern is about the methodology, and there are so many other things, the structure of the manuscript, and it is not the grammatical issues for which you are being invited to review the manuscript. So that's not a very important part. You can recommend that a copy editor can be hired, because the journal needs you to be of scientific expertise and not a copy editor. So keep that thing in your mind. Finally, you also say what you liked about the manuscript. Okay, so about this we'll be discussing further, but before that, some reminders are really important for you to be considered. Alright, so now as we are discussing about the final reminders, so some more important things are, as I already mentioned about numbering your comments, the author should also provide a more detailed explanation of the following: study design, the limitations, the prior results, and everything should be page numbered. You should have page numbers associated with it so that it becomes easier for you, as I've already mentioned. And it should not be like, as I have mentioned, you can see it on your screens, that in line 287, THERE should be THEIR. No. Again, the same thing. Don't be a copy editor, okay? You can recommend one. Okay, so continuing with the final reminders. It's very important not to humiliate or insult the author. You are not for that. So I've already crossed sentences like, this is a useless study and a complete waste of time. Don't do that. You are not supposed to do that. Because you need to remember one thing, and that is you have to be professional and respectful in your tone. Because put yourself in the shoes of the author and then try to understand how will you feel if you are getting such kind of disrespectful comments on your manuscript. So always remember that. You can start off with something, the topic is interesting, however the study has many methodological flaws and it requires major revisions in order to meet the journal guidelines. It is comparatively a much better way to comment and to advise that what needs to be done. So now I think your review is almost done, and I hope you all liked the video. Thanks for watching. And I think you can now submit your review. So next time, whenever you are writing a review and you are reviewing a manuscript, I hope the discussion which we have made here will actually help you out to write a better review, and it will be helpful for you. Thank you very much for watching the video, and once again, have a good day. Bye-bye. But that does not mean that we are going to impose that on the authors, because the authors can work a bit differently. They can have their own style. So let's not impose our methods and theories on them. Got it?